With the ever-growing impact of AI on our society, our lives, and our careers, it's becoming increasingly important to learn about this technology. And while AI might eventually replace all of us, in the meantime, it's the ones that don't actually understand and utilize this technology that'll be left behind. And learning about AI and how to harness its power can help you 100 times your productivity and stay ahead of the curve. And in this video, I'm going to be taking you through the approach that I'm going to be using to go from a beginner in AI to an expert. I spent thousands of hours researching learning science and looking into the field of AI already, and I've constructed to what I believe is the best way to learn AI. My methods focus on leveraging curiosity and engagement rather than just spamming through boring PowerPoint slides or lectures and struggling to retain the information. And by following my unconventional 3-step strategy, you'll be able to accelerate AI learning journey and do it in a way that's actually enjoyable. Step number 1 is to learn the background logic to the entire field of AI. And so instead of getting lost in the weeds of trying to learn the coding or the various mathematical equations, it's best just to understand what's even going on in the entire field. This will give your mind a backbone to build on, and it will mean that it's a lot easier to retain all of the information that you learn. Because then instead of that information just being an isolated fact or isolated strategy, you can fit it into the big picture and actually retain that information to a greater degree. And so the goal is to get a big picture, broad understanding of all of the fields within AI, what all of the terms mean, how all of the terms relate. And then you can get stuck into some of the more nitty-gritty details, but they'll actually make sense. And to do this, you can separate your learning into 2 types. You have your active and your passive learning. What I mean by active learning is it's those times where you're actually sitting down at a desk to specifically learn about AI. Whereas passive learning is learning throughout your day-to-day. Maybe you're doing a workout or driving. You might want to actually learn about AI during those processes where you don't have complete control over what you're doing, but you can still learn. And when you have the chance to actually sit down and actively learn, I wouldn't recommend just watching random YouTube videos or lectures because we don't really fully engage when we just mindlessly consume content. Instead, what I'd recommend is learning through questions, through curiosity. And the best way to do this is to just ask an AI. Ask ChatGPT or Claude. So when I sit down to learn about AI, what I'll do is I'll come to Claude because I prefer it over ChatGPT currently because it's more powerful. And then I'll just ask it the question. To start off with, I want to actually figure out what are the topics that I even want to learn about. So I'll start with a field. So maybe initially, if I'm trying to learn about AI, I'll say, what are all the big topics within AI? And I usually like to say to only include the biggest ones and make sure that one is not a subset of the other. Otherwise, they're going to end up spamming you with 1,000 words and it's going to be very confusing. And then I'll go through and give you lots of big words that can sometimes be a bit overwhelming. But I usually like to then again ask, please make sure none of these are subsets of each other. And then you'll get a slightly more narrowed down list of various big topics within this field of, say, AI. Now, what you want to do is go through and actually understand what these topics are and how you can actually categorize them and organize them in your mind. I like to actually ask Claude to do this for me and say, can you please categorize these into as few categories as possible? And then go through and ask, well, why did it actually categorize it like this? Why are these categories even different to begin with, and what are some of the overlaps between some of these categories? And so this will help me get a big picture understanding about some of the big fields within, say, the field of AI. But then I can go through and actually understand in more granular detail what each of those topics actually was. Because now I've got a general, very vague idea about how all of these things connect. I'll go through each of these individual topics, let's say machine learning, and ask it to give me a sort of short definition of what that is without any industry jargon so I can actually understand what they're saying. And then I'll also like to ask, well, why do I even care about this in comparison to the overall topic? So in this case, why do I even care about machine learning when it comes to AI? How does it relate to that big picture topic of AI? And we'll go through and explain why it's actually important to that overarching topic. Some of the times in AI, you can also get stuck in the weeds and you cannot really understand exactly what it's saying. And so I like to get it to give me an analogy to actually understand it. That way I can relate it back to day-to-day life to better understand what it's actually saying. And if there's ever a specific point where I'm really struggling with, I'll actually just say, I just don't get, and then I'll paste in the quotation that I'm just not really grasping, and then ask it to explain it further in simpler language and give more intuitive examples. And so now we've got a sort of big picture, vague understanding of all these different ideas and how they fit. We've gone through and we've understood the individual idea to a greater degree and why it's important and how it relates. But I also like to try and connect all of those ideas together, not just connecting that one idea to the overarching idea, say machine learning to AI, but also all of the sub-ideas. Say, how does machine learning relate to another idea of, say, expert systems? Whatever it is, I like to try and sort of use my curiosity and see, well, what am I curious about knowing? And see, how can these things relate to each other? What's the difference? Is one actually a subset of the other? Is one an application of the other? Do they both try and achieve the same thing? So I try to understand how it all connects and why it's all important. And occasionally what I'll do is when the written response that AI is giving isn't fully sort of satiating my curiosity, and I'm still not 100% sure, I'll get that same idea and I'll search it in Google. And then I'll just go straight to the images and see if there's any good images that help me actually understand what's going on. And you can even get these images and upload them back to Claude or ChatGPT and get them to explain what they're referring to and how that's actually relevant to the topic. And finally, if I'm really, really struggling, I'll search that topic in YouTube as well to try and get a good YouTube video explaining it. And then while I'm doing that, I'm quickly jotting down any ideas that come to mind about how all of these connect. I'm throwing ideas down on a page and I'm trying to slowly actually mind map my understanding of all of the words that are being thrown at me. I'm going through and I'm progressively actually developing that understanding, building that sort of mind map and actually developing my thought process through asking those questions. And then slowly consolidating and cleaning it up even more until you have a more sort of clear understanding about how they connect. But I love to sort of slowly build out a mind map because effectively it's a map of my mind. It's how I think about these topics, how I think they relate. And it really helps you concretely actually communicate how you understand these topics. And it facilitates that understanding because if you can't communicate it on a mind map, it really means that there's a hole in your understanding. And so then you can go and ask more questions. So as I'm sort of asking these questions and I'm understanding all this stuff, I'm putting it down on a mind map. I like to use this app called Concepts because it makes it really easy to have an infinite canvas. And then I can slowly sort of build out my understanding and have something to sort of temporarily store that knowledge on to help me actually unpack it and mold it. And if you want to learn more about this mind mapping process, two good YouTube channels are Justin Sung and Cajun Koi. Down the line, I might make my own video about it. However, they go quite in depth into how to correctly mind map things. But that's what I would be doing during that active learning process, because throughout that process, I'm thinking as much as I can. I'm using my mind, I'm following my curiosity, and it's going to mean that you're going to be learning a lot quicker than if you just sat there blankly watching YouTube videos. However, that doesn't mean you should never watch videos to learn. Because like I said, if you're really struggling with a topic, sometimes a video and a visual explanation can be best. But also, more importantly, when you actually want to passively learn about AI, when you want to learn but you don't actually have the capability to sit down and make a mind map or to sit down and type out questions for Claude or ChatGPT, then videos can be a great way to learn. Just like before, it's best to try and stick away from the ones that are really in the weeds and looking through the complex calculations and the coding, and instead just start with the big picture. And then if I find a really good video, I'll just save it to a playlist and then I'll come back to it in my next active learning session and mind map the content from that video. Occasionally, I'll even get the transcript from that video and upload it to Claude or ChatGPT and ask questions about it in my next active learning session. And there's a couple really good resources you can use for this. The first one is this guy's YouTube channel. This guy is an expert in AI and he's a couple really good videos discussing AI. Similarly, 3 Blue, 1 Brown has a really good playlist explaining neural networks, and IBM Technology has a lot of really good videos explaining AI. On top of that, there's some good courses. You can do a lot of IBM's courses on this platform called edX.org, and you can find a lot of really good courses from IBM. And then another fantastic resource is Deep Learning AI, where he has a lot of really, really good courses. Just make sure that you do the initial, more beginner-friendly ones, and specifically do the specialization and the initial introductory courses, because the further you go in, the more he'll go into the weeds of the actual coding. And so then using this technique, you'll start really big picture. You'll look at the big picture topics, AI, machine learning, deep learning, and you'll get a general big picture understanding. And then once you've sort of built out that big picture, you can start diving into the individual topics. You can learn more about machine learning, all the different types of machine learning. You can learn more about deep learning, all the different nuances in deep learning, and you can slowly build out that understanding. However, if you don't have a strong background in linear algebra, calculus, and probability, then at some point you're going to have to dive into the math. As you go through this process and you slowly dive more and more into the details, it's going to become more dependent on your understanding of the background mathematical principles. And so that's what brings me to the second step. And that is, if you don't have a strong foundational background in those mathematical concepts, you need to go and actually learn them. And so when you find yourself, say, learning about deep learning and they're talking about all of these matrices, then you need to go and learn about matrices. And for this process, I'd recommend two really good YouTube channels. So once again, 3 Blue, 1 Brown is a fantastic channel, especially to get a high level overview of how everything works. And so I'd go through and watch his relevant playlists. Some of the best ones are going to be the essence of calculus and the essence of linear algebra. And then finally, probabilities. Then when you want to dive into more of the details, I'd recommend this YouTube channel, which goes a lot more into the physical mathematical processes. So once again, he has a lot of playlists on calculus, and then he has a really good one on linear algebra as well. Finally, there's also some really good courses you can look at. Once again, on deep learning, they have a great course about the actual math behind AI. And you can even look at some open source online universities, like an introduction to statistics done by Stanford. However, I'd recommend only actually consuming this content when it becomes important. I wouldn't just arbitrarily go through courses. I would instead get to a roadblock where you don't understand a mathematical concept and then go and learn about that mathematical concept. Because then it's a lot more relevant in your mind. There's actually a reason you're learning it. And so your brain's going to be a lot more curious and you're actually going to retain it a lot better. Then the final step to learning AI, step 3, is to learn the actual implementation. So far, we've gone through how to learn the background theory. We've gone through how to learn the underlying math to ensure you can actually understand that background theory. But eventually you want to get to a point where you are implementing this. For some people, if you're only actually interested in the background knowledge of AI and you don't actually need to physically code it up, maybe you're just trying to make strategical decisions about how to use AI in your company, but you can hire another software engineer to actually code AI, then you don't actually really need to do this phase as much. However, if you are actually interested in implementing AI, or maybe you want a software engineering job about implementing AI, then this is going to be a vital phase to make your knowledge of AI actually practical. And so here you need to learn a lot of the background about coding. To start, you want to learn Python as the best starting language, especially for machine learning. A great course for this is CS50, but you can also just find lots of really good playlists on YouTube. Then you'd also want to learn the foundations of GitHub and how to work collaboratively. After that, you can start actually looking at the implementation of AI using Python with courses like CS50 AI, and you can also start to learn some of the machine learning frameworks. It's best to start with things like PyTorch, and then you can slowly move on to more advanced machine learning frameworks like TensorFlow, where TensorFlow is actually a simpler application, but it hides a lot of the understanding behind it. So it's best to start with PyTorch and then move on to TensorFlow. Once again, there's some great resources online. Free Codecamp has some fantastic tutorials about PyTorch. And then you can also use various of the deep learning AI courses because a lot of them will actually go into the weeds of coding and implementing it. Other great things you can do in this phase is actually develop your own projects and try and solve your own problems yourself. But that's the whole process. Step 1, learn the foundational understanding through curiosity. Step 2, if required, learn the background math to actually understand what's happening. And step 3, learn the implementation, the physical code, and how you can actually build things with AI yourself. And with those 3 steps, you can become an AI expert and drastically increase your productivity. If you're interested in seeing the outcome of me following these steps, then you can check out my next video, which I'll be releasing, which is a map of AI. And I'll progressively be going through these steps myself and making YouTube videos about it. And so if you want to save some time during that learning process, you can follow along and subscribe to the channel and watch those videos to learn alongside me. But apart from that, I hope you have a great day.